Before viewing video lessons, it is important to read the textbook using the learning guide as your turn-by-turn directions. Then use the learning guide to take organized notes in your own words with examples and pictures. This video is a continuation of the series from Chapter 11, Personality Disorders. In previous videos, we discussed the current view of personality disorders, which is based on the traditional view of personality disorders being organized into categories or clusters. And we are going to focus on Cluster B personality disorders, which are characterized by dramatic, emotional, or erratic behaviors. The first disorder we're going to discuss is antisocial personality disorder. People with antisocial personality disorder disregard and oftentimes violate the rights and safety of others. This is a pervasive disregard and violation, so this occurs in many contexts, many social situations. It's not isolated. So for example, a soldier on a battlefield that is killing the enemy is not somebody who has antisocial personality disorder because they're engaging in that behavior in a very specific context. So antisocial personality disorder, the person in all aspects of their lives tends not to care about what other people think and that other people have rights and have the right to be safe. And they tend to engage in behaviors that violate others' rights and safety. They don't comply with social norms and laws and tend to take this view that those rules don't apply to them. They may lie and con to get what they want with disregard for others. They lack empathy, or at least they lack the display of empathy and remorse. So when they do something that is harmful to someone else, they don't appear to care or feel bad about what they've done. They can be very irresponsible, impulsive, and aggressive, but some can be charming, at least initially, and manipulative. Antisocial personality disorder begins before the age of 15. However, we do not diagnose this disorder until adulthood, so people that engage in these types of behaviors in adolescence would be diagnosed with a disorder called conduct disorder. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. So there are a couple of terms that are frequently substituted for and associated with antisocial personality disorder. You may have heard the term psychopath or sociopath, and those are terms for particular types of personality traits that are associated with antisocial personality disorder, but those are not DSM diagnostic terms. So these might be considered as variants, even though these terms don't exist in the DSM-5. So what tends to characterize people described with psychopathy or described as psychopaths is they tend to be very charming and trusted. They have kind of a steady, normal job that on the surface makes them appear normal. But when you get to know them, they will appear artificial, shallow, and manipulative. They are often bright and well educated and can exercise some emotional and impulse control. And they rarely feel guilt or at least express feeling guilty. Sociopaths, on the other hand, tend to have obviously dysfunctional lives. So they are agitated and angered easily. They may engage in violent outbursts. They tend not to hold down long-term jobs or have any kind of a normal family life, and have very difficulty forming any kind of attachment, even a shallow attachment, to another person. So people who are psychopaths are less likely to be arrested. They tend to be a little bit more careful when they engage in behavior that is critical, that is criminal, or is violating the rights of others. So they tend to be, a little bit better at controlling themselves so that they don't get arrested. Sociopaths, on the other hand, are much more likely to be arrested. Their behavior is going to be much more obvious. They have an inability to control themselves in like a public setting where their behavior may be called to the attention of police. They are also likely to engage in acts that are impulsive and erratic and not really seem to care about the consequences. So people with antisocial personality disorder that are in this kind of psychopathic trait category can have a somewhat functional life on the outset, but they would still have disorder and disruption. This is the type of antisocial personality disorder that is sometimes associated with people who are prominent figures that engage in abusive behaviors. So this would be people in political positions, business positions of power, people in Hollywood who engage in abusive behaviors of others. They have some success and some ability to get by, but their behaviors are clearly violating the rights of others. So not everyone with antisocial personality disorder engages in criminal behavior. So a psychopath with a high IQ might be engaging in behaviors that sort of walk that very fine line between the legal and the illegal. They may see that line as maybe not quite so fine as you or I would see it. They may see it as kind of blurry, and if you can get away with cheating on your taxes and don't get caught, then it's okay. And so they may kind of get very close to the line or barely go over it, and so they may not be a criminal. What we find is that when we compare people who are criminals, who are arrested and convicted of crimes, and we compare people who are antisocial criminals to those who are not antisocial, criminals with antisocial personality disorder are much more likely to be repeat offenders and are more likely to have violent offenses. So we're going to talk a little bit about the causes of antisocial personality disorder separate from some of the other diagnoses. Antisocial personality is one of the most studied, and we have the most research support behind it. And so we know that personality disorders have their roots in childhood, although they're not diagnosed in adulthood. For antisocial personality, there are two specific disorders of childhood and or adolescence that seem to be associated with increased risk of developing or being diagnosed with antisocial personality in adulthood. The first one is called oppositional defiant disorder. This one is diagnosed in childhood only, and it's where a child displays a pattern where they tend to be very negative. So they may be, saying no, 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 no all the time. And yes, kids do go through phases where they kind of like that word no, but this would be a pattern that would be in excess of the normal childhood behavior. So they're very negative, defiant, disobedient, and display hostile behavior towards authority figures. And this is behavior that is evident before the age of 8 and would appear excessive compared to their same age peers. Conduct disorder is a disorder that can be diagnosed in children, but is also potentially diagnosed in adolescents. So you could have a child with oppositional defiant disorder that, if they continued those types of behaviors, would be very likely to meet the criteria for a conduct disorder. So conduct disorder is a little bit more severe than oppositional defiant. So children who obtain this diagnosis are having an even more extreme type of behavior than kids with ODD. So in conduct disorder, you can really see, the parallel to the adult diagnosis of antisocial personality. And that's where they're engaging in behavior in which the rights of others or age-appropriate societal norms and rules are violated. And so think about when you were a teenager, you probably had some rules that applied to you that didn't apply to adults. And so this could be things like, you can't drive until you are of a certain age. You can't drink until you are of a certain age. You can't choose where you go. You must go to school if school is in session, or you're truant. There are all kinds of rules within a school building that don't apply to most of the rest of the world. Dress code and hat, and whether or not you can go to the bathroom whenever you personally need to. All of that is sort of tied up in those age-appropriate norms and rules. So some kids with ODD and some kids with conduct disorder, if those behaviors continue into adulthood, will have an antisocial personality disorder diagnosis.